Hey guys, tonight we're plunging into the blood-soaked nightmare of the 100 Years' War, where you feel the damp chill of medieval mud seeping through your boots right from the start, as if history's ghosts are clawing at your ankles, whispering that this wasn't just a tidy century of squabbles but 116 years of relentless horror that devoured millions, turning lush fields into graveyards faster than a viral plague could empty a modern city. Imagine standing in the flickering torchlight of a Norman castle, the wet wool of your cloak sticking to your skin like a second, suffocating layer, while kings bickered over thrones like spoiled siblings fighting over the last slice of pie, all sparked by a dead monarch's airless bed and a twisted law that barred women from inheritance. Dooming Europe to endless slaughter, did you know one battle alone at Agincourt left French knights piled so high in the rain-slicked dirt that survivors had to climb over their own dead? A statistic that makes today's traffic jams feel like a gentle nudge, or that a teenage peasant girl claimed divine voices commanded her to lead armies. Flipping the script on mighty empires in a twist more ironic than your phone auto-correcting prayers to payers, and here's the quiet terror. What if the longbow, that humble yew stick, wasn't a weapon, but fate's sarcastic joke, piercing armoured nobles like cheap balloons and birthing nationalism from rivers of empathy-inducing blood, where peasants like you shivered in the filth, paying the ultimate price for royal egos. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how far this sleepy little time machine reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step into the damp chill of Norman halls, the stone walls slick with moisture that seeps into your bones like an uninvited guest who won't leave, and the air hangs heavy with the musty scent of ancient tapestries rotting in the perpetual gloom, pricking your skin with tiny needles of cold that make you shiver involuntarily, as if history itself is whispering warnings through the drafts. Your boots echo on the flagstones, each step a reminder of the conqueror's boot that stomped here centuries ago. William the Bastard, they called him before he became the conqueror, crashing through Hastings in 1066 with his Norman horde, shattering Saxon shields and claiming England while still owing fealty to the French king for his duchy. A twisted loyalty that binds you now in feudal chains tighter than any iron shackle, pulling at your divided heart like a noose slowly tightening. You feel the wet wool of your cloak clinging to your shoulders, heavy and sodden from the relentless Norman rain outside, its fibres scratching against your neck as you navigate the torchlit corridors where flames flicker uncertainly, casting elongated shadows that dance like mocking spirits, their orange glow mutating into grotesque shapes that remind you of the injustices etched into these walls, kings who ruled empires but knelt as vassals, a paradox that tastes like iron on your teeth, bitter and metallic, as if you're biting down on the rusted links of obligation. Suddenly, a gust from an open arrow slit carries the faint clang of distant hammers forging armour, and you stumble upon a grand hall where Henry II Plantagenet holds court, his figure looming like a storm cloud, ruling from Scotland to the Pyrenees, yet forced to bow before the French crown for his continental lands, an absurdity that historians still debate whether it was genius diplomacy or the seed of inevitable doom. Much like how modern CEOs juggle boardrooms but answer to shareholders who'd sell them out for a quarterly bonus, you approach the throne, your pulse quickening with the sensory struggle of the room's oppressive heat from the massive hearth, conflicting with the chill drafts, sweat beading on your forehead while your fingers numb from the cold. And Henry's eyes lock onto yours with a piercing gaze that holds the weight of ambition, his marriage to Eleanor of Aquitaine bringing vast territories but also endless quarrels, her Aquitaine duchy bringing vast swaths of land dotted with vineyards where grapes fermented into wines that nobles sipped while plotting. Yet those same lands festered with rebellions fueled by local lords who chafed under distant rule. A fascinating tidbit being how knights in those days sometimes lined their helmets with inflated pig bladders to cushion blows from maces, an absurd makeshift padding that could burst mid-battle like a grotesque balloon, leaving the wearer dazed and vulnerable. The irony hits you like a sly punch. Here's a king more powerful than most, yet his sons revolt against him in fits of filial fury. Richard the Lionheart and John scheming in shadows that mirror the torchlight's fickle play, and Thomas Becket's murder in the cathedral unfolds in your mind's eye as a shocking stain on his legacy. Blood pooling on altar stones that chills you to your core with its sad betrayal. Empathy welling up for the archbishop who dared challenge royal whim over church appointments. Sarcasm dripping as you think, ah yes, nothing says divine right like assassinating your best friend in a house of God. Worse than ghosting someone after a bad date in today's swipe right world, where at least you don't end up canonized as a martyr. You zoom out for a moment, the hall blurring into a vast web of feudal threads stretching across Europe like veins pulsing with the blood of obligation, where loyalty isn't a choice but a chain linking duke to king in an endless dance of power and resentment, the air thickening with the scent of roasting venison from the kitchens below, mingling with the filth of unwashed bodies pressed together in courtly intrigue, and you feel the injustice prick deeper. The common folk outside these walls toiling in mud fields under the lash of taxes to fund royal whims, their lives ground down like grain under millstones, while nobles play games of thrones that will spill innocent blood in rivers. As you turn a corner, the torchlight dims, revealing faded murals of battles past, where William's arrow at Hastings debated if it truly struck Harold in the eye, or was just embroidered propaganda on the Bayeux tapestry to glorify the victor echoes the cold bite of fate. Your skin crawling with the realization that this divided loyalty isn't just history's quirky footnote, but a creeping horror that festers like an untreated wound. Breeding wars from whispers of discontent that grow into roars of rebellion. The wet wool shifts uncomfortably against your back, a constant itch like forgotten regrets scratching at your awareness, and you taste that iron tang again, stronger now, as if the blood of future fields is already on your tongue, pulling you forward into the gathering storm where kings nurse grievances like old wounds that refuse to scar over, the hall's echoes fading into a psychological chill that settles in your chest, heavy as the crown that crushes those who wear it, leaving you questioning if any loyalty is worth the pain it promises, the shadows lengthening as if to swallow the light entirely. The maps in a side chamber sprawl across tables like flayed skins under the sputtering torch, borders drawn in faded ink that bleed into one another, symbolizing the messy entanglement of Anglo-French fates where one man's duchy becomes another's dominion, and you trace a finger along the line of Normandy, feeling the rough parchment snag your skin, a sensory reminder of territories won through conquest but held by fragile oaths. Henry's empire, a patchwork of pride and peril that mocks the notion of stable rule with its constant fractures. The room spins slightly in your vision, a zoom out to the broader tapestry of Europe where Holy Roman emperors watch with envious eyes from their fragmented realms. A sarcastic mirror to this Anglo-French mess where power is as illusory as the torchlight's warmth, and you can't help but chuckle inwardly at the thought. Imagine explaining to a medieval knight that one day nations would draw lines on digital maps and call it peace. No different from kids fighting over playground turf but with nuclear deterrents instead of catapults. The absurdity lingering like how some Norman healers prescribe leech treatments to balance the humours before council meetings. Believing bloodletting sharpened the mind for intrigue, though historians argue if it was genuine medicine or just a placebo for the paranoid. Much like chugging coffee before a Zoom call today to feign alertness, a shocking draft carries voices from above, ghostly echoes of courtiers plotting marriages that will unravel like cheap thread in the winds of ambition, and you feel the pain of it all, the human cost hidden in these grand schemes where sons are pawned off like chess pieces to secure alliances, a sad undercurrent that tugs at your empathy like the wet wool now chafing raw spots on your shoulders, leaving faint red marks as reminders of discomfort. Historians still argue whether Eleanor's influence was the true power behind Henry's throne, or if she was merely a catalyst for his son's rebellions. But standing here, you sense the creeping horror of predestination in these stone confines, chains of cause and effect binding tighter than any feudal vow, the iron taste evolving into something sharper, like anticipation of betrayal that coats your mouth with metallic foreboding. As you lean against the cold stone for support, the injustice settles over you like a shroud woven from the threads of forgotten lives, whispering that this Norman foundation is cracking under the weight of its own contradictions, the damp chill deepening into your marrow as if the walls themselves are weeping for the wars to come, and you wonder, as the shadows coalesce into darker forms, how much blood will it take to sever these divided loyalties, and will the flickering torch ever burn bright enough to illuminate the path out of this feudal labyrinth? The murals on the walls seem to move in the mutating light, figures of knights twisting in eternal combat, a strange visual that chills your spine as the room's darkness creeps closer, mutating the familiar into the foreboding, pulling you inexorably toward the precipice where whispers become roars of defiance. You kneel in the flickering candlelight of a Paris court, the wax dripping slowly like tears from weary eyes, pooling on the ornate table before you in waxy blobs that harden into grotesque shapes, and the air thickens with the acrid smoke of tallow, stinging your nostrils with a greasy filth that clings to your throat, making each breath a laboured gasp as if the very atmosphere is conspiring to suffocate the secrets whispered here. Your knees ache against the cold marble floor, the stone unyielding and biting through the thin fabric of your hose, a sensory struggle that mirrors the injustice unfolding around you, where royal bloodlines fray like worn tapestry under the weight of ambition and accident, the threads pulling apart with audible snaps in your imagination, leaving gaps where daughters' names should weave through, but instead dangle forgotten, their whispers stinging your ears like invisible bees swarming in the shadows. You taste the bitter irony on your tongue, metallic and sharp, evolving from the iron tang of feudal chains into something more acrid, like vinegar mixed with regret. As Philip the Fair lies dying in 1314, his body racked by a hunting accident that historians still debate was mere misfortune or divine retribution for humbling the Pope and crushing the Templars. His reign a tower of ruthless efficiency now crumbling like sandcastles under a rising tide. The court buzzes with courtiers in silken robes that rustle like dry leaves, their faces illuminated by the mutating candle flames that twist from steady glows into erratic dances, casting elongated shadows on the gilded walls where portraits of past kings stare down with judgmental eyes, and you feel the wet wool of your undergarments damp from the Seine's misty fog, seeping through the windows, chafing against your thighs. A constant irritation that grounds you in the physical toil of this era, where even nobility can't escape the filth of unwashed linens and perpetual dampness. Suddenly, a herald's voice cuts through the murmur, announcing Louis XI's ascension, but you sense the fragility as he rules for barely 2 years, dying in 1316 after a game of jeu de paume that overheated his blood, leaving only a daughter, Joan, whose tiny cries echo faintly in your mind like a sad lament for what could have been, empathy swelling in your chest for this infant cast aside by laws that prioritize male heirs, a shocking element that pricks deeper than any courtier's dagger, sarcasm bubbling up as you think, the wisdom of ancient Salic law, dug up from Frankish dust to bar women from the throne, because nothing says stable monarchy like pretending half the bloodline doesn't exist. Worse than modern family feuds where wills get contested over who gets grandma's china set. You rise unsteadily, your legs numb from kneeling, and approach the Regency Council dominated by Charles of Valois, his eyes gleaming with calculated ambition as they declare the crown can't pass through females. A factual moment folded into the chaos where the assembly invokes dusty precedents to crown Philip the Tall, whose 6-year reign sees him consolidate power but leave only daughters again, the pattern repeating like a cursed loop that chills you with its inevitability. Historians arguing whether this was genuine legal tradition or a convenient fabrication to keep foreign claims at bay, much like how today's politicians twist old statutes to block inconvenient rivals. The absurd tidbit hits you as a servant passes with a tray of spiced wine, reminding you how medieval physicians prescribed leech applications to royal bellies to cure infertility, believing bad humours blocked male heirs, though it often just weakened the patient further. A fascinating folly that mutates the iron taste in your mouth into something almost comical, like chugging herbal teas for lottery luck in our era. You zoom out for a poetic breath, the court dissolving into a grand mosaic of European dynasties where Capetian threads interweave with Plantagenet knots, a living fabric pulsing with the heartbeat of nations yet to be born. The candlelight softening into a hazy aura that blurs the lines between kin and enemy. A physical event unfolds as Charles IV ascends in 1322, the last son of Philip the Fair, his courtly procession brushing past you with the rustle of velvet and the clink of golden chains. But death claims him in 1328 without a male heir, the direct line snapping like brittle bone, and you feel the shock ripple through the assembly, nobles gathering in tense huddles where whispers turn to heated debates, the air growing heavier with the scent of intrigue and unwashed ambition. your own pulse racing as if you're part of the conspiracy. The bitter filth of forgotten daughters clings to you now, their spectral forms hovering in the candle's wavering light. Daughters like Joan of Navarre, or the 4 girls of Philip V, shunted aside for uncles and cousins. A sad injustice that tugs at your empathy like invisible strings, making you question the humanity behind these crowns. Sarcasm whispering that it's also elegantly medieval, build an empire on blood, then watch it crumble over gender. No different from corporate glass ceilings today where qualified women get overlooked for the boss's nephew. You navigate the throng, brushing against a lady-in-waiting whose perfume of rosewater barely masks the underlying sweat. A sensory clash that heightens your discomfort, and overhear the fateful decision to crown Philip of Valois as Philip VI, nephew of the fair. His claim bolstered by proximity and the council's fear of an English king on the French throne, the room erupting in subdued cheers that ring hollow in your ears. Across the channel, you sense Edward III watching like a predator in the mist, his mother's Isabella, daughter of Philip IV, transmitting a claim closer in blood but dismissed by the same Salic sleight of hand. A debate that scholars still wage over whether it was ironclad law or opportunistic patriarchy. The irony thick as the wax build up on the candelabras. The wet wool mutates into a heavier burden, sodden now with the imaginary sweat of anxiety as the court disperses, leaving you alone in the dimming light where candles gutter like failing hopes. The iron bitterness sharpening into foreboding as you ponder the lessons of this fraying tapestry. Dynasties built on exclusion invite their own unravelling. A modern parallel to how ignoring diverse voices in any boardroom leads to blind spots bigger than medieval moats. A shocking murmur reaches you from the antechamber, hints of Edward's growing ambition, his youth belying a warrior's heart that will soon challenge this fragile peace. And you feel the psychological chill deepen, the flickering flames casting monstrous silhouettes that promise storms ahead, your knees still throbbing from the kneel as if imprinted with the weight of crowns yet to fall. The air cools further, the musty scent evolving into something danker, like mouldy parchment foretelling doom, and you step toward the grand doors, the whispers of succession trailing you like ghosts, mutating into accusations that prick your conscience with the injustice of it all, leaving you with a mood shift that tugs you onward. How long can bloodlines fray before they snap entirely, spilling the realm into chaos? The candlelight wanes to embers, their glow a strange visual of dying stars in a velvet sky, pulsing with the unspoken terror of what comes next. Salt spray lashes your face on the English Channel's restless waves, each droplet stinging like tiny accusations from the sea itself, cold and relentless as they soak into your skin, leaving a briny film that tightens uncomfortably, and the wind howls through the rigging of the ship you're on, whipping your hair into tangles that pull at your scalp with sharp tugs, a sensory struggle that makes you grip the wooden rail tighter, your knuckles whitening against the splintered surface slick with foam, as if the ocean is trying to drag you into its unjust depths, where forgotten sailors whisper of drowned ambitions. You taste the iron on your teeth now mutated into a salty corrosion, like rust mixed with the blood of old grievances, biting sharper with every gust that carries the faint cries of gulls wheeling overhead, their shadows flitting across the deck like ominous portents, and the wet wool of your cloak, heavy from the spray, clings to your body like a second skin grown clammy and burdensome, chafing at your arms as you lean forward to peer through the fog rolling in thick and grey, obscuring the distant shores where kings forge fragile alliances in smoke-filled chambers far from this churning chaos. A physical event surges as the ship pitches violently on a swell, throwing you against the rail with a thud that jars your ribs, the cold water splashing up to drench your legs, numbness spreading from your toes upward like a creeping paralysis, and you steady yourself amid the crew's muttered curses, their faces weathered and scarred, eyes squinting against the salt that burns like unspoken resentments. Edward III's ambition echoes in your mind as the vessel cuts toward Flemish ports. His young reign in the 1330s marked by calculated manoeuvres to build coalitions against Philip VI, allying with the textile merchants of Flanders who depend on English wool like addicts on their fix, a factual moment where economic pressure twists loyalties. Historians still debating if this was brilliant strategy or desperate gambling that mortgaged England's future to Italian bankers whose loans came with interest rates that would make modern credit card companies blush with envy. The absurd tidbit surfaces as a sailor nearby adjusts his hood made from oiled sheepskin, reminding you how medieval mariners sometimes smeared their cloaks with fish oil to repel water, a foul-smelling concoction that attracted rats more than it warded off leaks, mutating the wet wool's discomfort into a greasy slickness that slides unpleasantly against your neck. You zoom out poetically, the channel blurring into a vast grey expanse where waves rise like the egos of monarchs, connecting islands of power in a sea of mutual suspicion, the horizon a hazy line between alliance and betrayal. Sarcasm creeps in as you think, oh sure, nothing bonds nations like threatening to cut off their sheep fluff supply, because who needs diplomacy when you can weaponize knitting materials, worse than today's trade wars where tariffs hit your wallet like a sneaky subscription fee you never signed up for. The shocking element hits with the realization of border skirmishes escalating, French officials chipping at English holdings in Gascony, appointing their own men to post traditionally English, a sad erosion that pricks your empathy for the locals caught in the crossfire, families divided by arbitrary lines drawn on maps they've never seen, their lives upended by royal whims that treat them like pawns in a game where the board is soaked in real blood. You navigate the deck toward the bow, the fog thickening into an unjust veil that hides the approaching Flemish coast, where Edward secures support from merchants in Ghent and Bruges, their prosperity tied to English fleeces that weave into fine cloth sold across Europe. But nominal fealty to France creates a tension that vibrates through the air like the taut ropes overhead. A wave crashes nearby, spraying you anew and mutating the salt iron taste into something more acrid, like bile rising from the stomach of history itself, and you overhear the captain grumbling about French interference in Scottish affairs, Philip VI aiding David II against English claims, a layered conflict that feels like kicking someone while they're down, sarcasm whispering that it's also elegantly medieval support your enemy's enemy, because alliances are just temporary tattoos that wash off in the first storm. The crew hauls crates of wool below decks, their grunts echoing your own laboured breaths against the wind's assault, and you feel the injustice deepen. English taxes soaring to fund these borrowed crowns, parliaments granting funds in exchange for concessions that slowly erode royal power. A modern parallel to how crowdfunding campaigns promise perks but deliver delays and disappointments. Empathy wells for the yeoman farmers back home, their fields stripped for war chests while they shiver in hovels, a sad undercurrent that tugs at you like the currents pulling the ship. As the fog lifts slightly, revealing hazy outlines of harbour walls, you spot imperial banners fluttering weakly, Louis IV of the Holy Roman Empire pledging support for English gold, his own papal conflicts making him a willing pawn in this grand chess. Though scholars argue if his aid was genuine or just a feint to weaken French influence, much like alliance building in today's geopolitics where handshakes hide hidden agendas, the wet wool evolves, now crusted with salt that cracks when you move, a brittle armour against the elements that offers no real protection, and the torchlight from the ship's lanterns muted by the mist casts watery reflections on the waves, mutating into shimmering illusions that dance like false promises. A sailor shares a tale of trade disputes, how French raids on English shipping spark retaliations that escalate into full declarations. Philip VI declaring English lands forfeit in 1337 for failed feudal duties. Edward responding not as vassal but as rightful king, claiming the French throne through his mother Isabella, a bold stroke that chills you with its audacity. The fog seeming to thicken again, as if to swallow the consequences. The physical jolt comes as the ship docks with a grinding thud against the pier, ropes thrown and secured with heaves that strain your arms as you help, the cold seeping deeper into your joints like arthritis from years at sea. Sarcasm flickers like the lanterns glow, borrow crowns to buy friends, because nothing says eternal bond like subsidized betrayal, no better than swiping right on a profile full of red flags. The unjust fog lingers, all trade wars cloaking deeper dynastic wounds, and you step onto the creaking dock, the salt spray fading but the shiver remaining, a psychological chill that whispers of storms brewing beyond this fragile peace, your teeth grinding on that corroded iron as alliances form like ice on winter ponds, thin and prone to cracking under pressure. The harbour lights blur into a strange visual of floating embers, bobbing on the water like lost souls seeking shore, pulling your gaze toward the uncertain path ahead, where borrowed crowns weigh heavier than gold. Arrows whistle through the salty harbour air at slies, each shaft slicing the wind with a deadly hum that vibrates in your ears like a swarm of angry hornets, and you duck instinctively behind the ship's bulwark as the first volley rains down. The cold dread piercing your chest sharper than any bodkin point, your heart pounding against ribs that feel suddenly too fragile in this chaos of wood and water. Salt spray mingles with the metallic tang on your tongue, the iron taste now corroded by brine into something harsher, like licking a rusted anchor chain pulled from the depths, and the wet wool of your tunic sodden from the channel's relentless mist clings to your torso like a clammy embrace, its weight pulling at your shoulders as you peer over the edge, the fibres chafing raw patches on your skin that burn with every shift. You grip the longbow in your hands, its yew wood smooth and familiar under calloused fingers, drawing back the string with a creak that echoes the tension in your muscles, the sensory struggle of salt-crusted eyes blurring your vision as you aim at the French fleet chained together in the harbour like a floating fortress of hubris, their vessels packed tight, masts tangling like skeletal fingers, reaching for salvation they won't find. A physical event erupts as the English ships close in under Edward III's command, the deck lurching beneath you with a crash of hulls grinding against waves, and you loose your arrow, feeling the recoil jolt through your arms like a thunderclap, the shaft joining hundreds in a devastating storm that turns the air into a haze of feathered death, piercing sails and flesh alike in a shocking display where French sailors scream and fall, their blood staining the decks crimson against the grey sea. The absurd tidbit flashes through your mind amid the frenzy how some archers wrapped their bowstrings in waxed silk to keep them dry. A finicky trick that could mean life or death in this downpour, though historians debate if it was widespread innovation or just desperate improvisation born from rainy English fields, much like how today's survivalists hoard duct tape for every apocalypse scenario. Sarcasm curls your lips as you nock another arrow, thinking, the genius of chaining ships together for defence. Because nothing says impregnable like turning your navy into a sitting duck barbecue, worse than parking your car in a no-tow zone during rush hour and expecting mercy from the meter maid. The factual moment weaves in as the battle rages from dawn. June 24, 1340, Edward himself directing from the flagship, his smaller fleet outmanoeuvring the 190 French vessels commanded by Hugh Quiéret and Nicolas Béhuchet, their defensive lines becoming killing grounds under the relentless barrage. Longbows loosing 12 arrows a minute with precision that shreds chainmail at close range. A tactical revolution that shifts the war's tide and secures channel control for English invasions to come. You zoom out lyrically, the harbour blurring into a vast canvas of churning blue where wooden behemoths clash like titans in a forgotten myth. Waves lapping at hulls with indifferent rhythm while men carve history in screams and splinters. A shocking element grips you as bodies tumble into the water, the French unable to manoeuvre their chained formation, turning the sea into a frothy red soup where survivors cling to debris, empathy surging for these sailors far from home, their courage wasted on rigid orders that doom them, a sad waste that pricks deeper than the arrows whistling past your ear. The modern comparison hits as you reload, this naval slaughter feeling like a brutal online game where one team's glitchy strategy leads to total wipeout, no respawn for the losers who float face down in the swell. Another wave of sarcasm washes over you. Look at the French commanders, so confident in numbers, yet here you are, a yeoman farmer turned archer, picking them off from platforms built high on the ships, mocking their chivalric pretensions with every twang. Because nothing humbles a knight like a peasant's bowstring singing his dirge. The torchlight motif mutates here into signal fires on the masts, their flames guttering in the wind like desperate beacons, casting erratic glows on the carnage below, where shadows elongate into monstrous forms, writhing on blood-slick decks. You feel the cold dread mutate too, from fear into grim exhilaration as the French fleet crumbles, thousands dying in hours, both commanders slain amid the slaughter, a victory so complete that court jesters back in Paris quip about English cowards not jumping into the sea like the brave French fish, a cruel joke that chills you with its dark humour, underscoring the human cost folded into triumph. The wet wool evolves, now crusted with salt and speckled with spray that hardens like armour, but it offers no protection from the psychological chill settling in as the sun sets on the wreckage, bodies bobbing like discarded puppets in the harbour's embrace, Historians still argue whether Sluys was the war's turning point or just a flashy prelude, its longbow dominance foreshadowing land battles to come. But in this moment, you lower your bow, arms aching from the draw, the iron brine taste fading to exhaustion as cheers rise from your comrades. Yet the sad undercurrent lingers for the drowned, their unjust end a testament to naval might's fragile illusion. The scene shifts with the tide, pulling debris outward in strange patterns that resemble fractured crowns sinking into the depths, a visual that sends a mood shift rippling through you. What if this splash of victory only heralds deeper tombs on distant fields? Mud squelches under your boots in Brittany's endless sieges, each step sinking deeper into the churned earth that clings to your soles like desperate hands from below, pulling you down with a sucking grip that makes your calves burn with the effort of extraction, and the air hangs thick with the fetid stench of stagnant ditches, a mix of rotting vegetation and human waste that assaults your nostrils, forcing bile up your throat in waves that you swallow back with gritted teeth. Starvation gnaws at your belly like a relentless thief, an empty ache that twists your insides into knots, sharper than any blade, as rations dwindle to mouldy crusts that taste of despair, and the faint iron corrosion now mutating into a gnawing hunger pang that echoes the rust of neglected armour. Biting into your resolve with every hollow rumble, you huddle behind earthen ramparts outside Vannes in 1342, the wet wool of your gambeson drenched from incessant Breton rains, hanging heavy on your frame, its sodden weight pressing against your ribs like a lover-turned tormentor, chafing skin raw beneath where sweat and mud mingle into a gritty paste that itches unbearably. A sensory struggle that blurs the line between discomfort and agony as you peer through the mist at the fortress walls, their stone faces scarred by trebuchet strikes that thud rhythmically like a giant's heartbeat. A physical event jolts you as the enemy sallies forth from the gates. Crossbow bolts hissing through the air like venomous snakes, one grazing your shoulder with a fiery sting that draws blood, warm and sticky, trickling down your arm, mixing with the rain to dilute into pink rivulets that soak into the wool, mutating its dampness into a bloody slurry that cools rapidly in the chill wind. Your cry muffled amid the clash of steel as English men-at-arms rush to meet the charge, swords ringing against shields in a cacophony that drowns the world. The factual moment slips in as Edward III lands in Brittany to back John de Montfort's claim in the War of Breton Succession, a mirror to the larger Anglo-French feud where dukes battle over inheritance like dogs over a bone. Historians still debating if this was strategic genius to gain a foothold or a costly sideshow that drained resources better spent elsewhere. Much like modern proxy wars where superpowers fund rebels to poke at rivals without direct commitment. Sarcasm curls your lip as you bind the wound with a strip of filthy cloth, thinking, the glory of succession squabbles, where brothers turn on brothers for a title and a pile of damp stones, because nothing says family legacy like starving out your kin in a siege, worse than holiday dinners where uncles argue over inheritance while the turkey gets cold. The absurd tidbit emerges as a comrade shares a hunk of hard cheese, reminding you how besiegers sometimes catapulted dead animals over walls to spread disease, a grotesque tactic using cows bloated with plague as biological bombs. Though scholars argue if it was effective warfare or just psychological terror amplified by chroniclers' exaggerations, you zoom out poetically, the siege lines stretching into a labyrinth of trenches and tents under leaden skies, a microcosm of Europe's fractured soul where personal claims ignite continental fires, the horizon smudged with smoke rising like weary prayers unanswered. A shocking element grips you as hunger deepens, reports filtering in of townsfolk inside eating rats and boiling leather belts for sustenance, their children's wails piercing the night like accusatory fingers, empathy surging for these innocents trapped in noble games, a sad tableau that pricks your conscience deeper than the bolts graze, making you question the humanity of it all amid crumbling walls that weep mortar like tears. The modern comparison strikes as you chew the meagre ration, this endless wait feeling like being stuck in an airport layover from hell. No end in sight and the vending machines empty, but with catapults lobbing stones instead of delayed announcements. Another wave of sarcasm washes over as the assault falters. French reinforcements arriving under Charles of Blois, Montfort's rival backed by Philip VI, turning the tide in skirmishes that leave bodies strewn like discarded puppets. Because why settle disputes with words when you can drag thousands into the mud for a duke's vanity project? The torchlight motif mutates here into bonfires along the lines, their flames crackling with damp wood that pops like gunfire, casting ruddy glows on exhausted faces where shadows hollow eyes into sockets of despair, illuminating the painful absurdity of it all, succession wars that promise glory but deliver only filth and famine. You reload a crossbow borrowed from a fallen ally, the mechanism clicking stiffly in your numb fingers, the iron taste sharpening into something like defiance mixed with dread as night falls, the siege dragging on in a grinding stalemate that wears souls thinner than the rations. Revisiting Henry II from earlier halls, his Plantagenet legacy twists surprisingly here in Brittany, where his Aquitaine ties echo in these disputed lands once part of Eleanor's dowry, now contested by descendants who honour his empire building with more bloodshed. An ironic continuation that mutates his towering figure into a ghostly instigator hovering over these fields. The wet wool steams slightly by the fire, its dampness evolving into a steamy vapour that carries the acrid scent of smoke and sweat, blending into the night's chill that seeps back into your bones as embers die down. Empathy lingers for the besieged, their starvation a mirror to your own gnawing void, a sad solidarity across enemy lines where injustice binds all in shared misery. As dawn creeps grey and unforgiving, the walls stand defiant still, their silhouettes jagged against the light like broken teeth grinning mockingly. A strange visual that sends a psychological chill racing up your spine, shifting your mood toward weary resolve. What hidden absurdities lurk in these crumbling stones, waiting to unravel the next thread of this endless tapestry. The acrid smoke of Cressy battlefield clings to your sweat-soaked wool, drifting in thick tendrils that burn your eyes and coat your lungs with a gritty haze. Each inhale a rasping cough that scrapes your throat raw, as if the very air has turned traitor, conspiring with the chaos to choke the life from you while arrows rain like bitter judgments from the English lines, their feathered shafts whistling down in a deadly chorus that thuds into earth and flesh alike, forcing you to scramble through the mud on hands and knees. The injustice of it all pricking deeper than the barbs as French knights charge blindly into the storm, their chivalric glory evaporating into hollow echoes of clanging steel and dying gasps. You feel the wet wool of your surcoat drenched in a mix of rain and blood sticking to your back like a parasitic skin, heavy and constricting, chafing against fresh bruises from the jostle of panicked retreat, the fibres mutating from mere dampness into a sodden weight that pulls at your every move, while the iron taste on your teeth sharpens into something acrid and sooty, like biting into charred bone amid the gunpowder's early whiff, a precursor to horrors yet unborn. A physical event surges as the ground trembles under the thunder of mounted charges. You caught in the press of dismounted men-at-arms pushing forward, a lance grazing your helm with a screech that rings in your skull like a bell tolled for the damned, the impact jarring your neck and sending stars exploding behind your eyelids, blood trickling warm from a shallow cut that mixes with sweat to sting like salt in an open wound. The factual moment embeds itself as August 26th, 1346 unfolds in carnage. Edward III's forces arrayed on a hill near Crécy-en-Ponthieu, his son the Black Prince commanding the vanguard at just 16. Longbows decimating the French waves led by Philip VI, who charges 15 times only to be wounded and dragged away. A tactical mismatch where English discipline trumps French valour. Historians still arguing whether the Welsh longbowman's rate of fire up to 12 arrows a minute or the muddy terrain after rain was the true decider. Much like how in today's drone warfare, technology levels the field against sheer numbers in a sarcastic nod to evolution's cruel efficiency. Sarcasm whispers through the din as you reload a crossbow scavenged from a fallen comrade, thinking, oh, the splendour of chivalry, where armoured lords on destriers prance into a hail of peasant-shot death, because nothing screams nobility like getting turned into a hedgehog for a code that values glory over survival. Worse than signing up for extreme sport retreat, only to find out the safety nets are made of wishful thinking. The absurd tidbit surfaces amid the screams. How some knights padded their armour with layers of linen stuffed with horsehair to absorb impacts, a bulky contraption that turned them into waddling targets in the mud. Though scholars debate if it saved lives or just slowed them down for easier picking, mutating the wet wool's discomfort into a bulky encumbrance that hampers your own frantic crawl. You zoom out lyrically, the battlefield stretching into a tapestry of turmoil under a leaden sky, where individual clashes weave into a grand mosaic of human folly. The horizon smudged with rising smoke like forgotten incense to gods of war who turn deaf ears to pleas. A shocking element grips you as a nearby knight, his visor raised to reveal a face twisted in agony, takes an arrow through the throat, gurgling his last amid the filth, empathy flooding for this stranger whose dreams of tournament fame end in anonymous mud. A sad dissolution that pricks your core with the waste of it all. Lives snuffed like candles in a gale for kings' quarrels. The modern comparison strikes as you fire back blindly. This meat grinder of a battle feeling like a corporate merger gone wrong, where middle management charges into the fray only to get shredded by efficiency experts from afar. No golden parachutes for the fallen. Another sarcastic jab bubbles up. Look at the Genoese crossbowmen hired by the French. Their strings slackened by rain, mocked by English taunts as they falter. Because hiring mercenaries is always a solid plan until weather plays favourites. No better than betting on a startup app that crashes on launch day. Revisiting Edward III from the Channel's foggy alliances, his figure surprises here not as distant schemer but field commander, dismounted among his men to inspire, a twist that mutates his boy-king image into a hardened tactician whose feigned retreat lures the French deeper into the kill zone. The torchlight of campfires from last night now echoed in the battlefield's scattered blazes, their flames licking at fallen banners like hungry tongues. The wet wool steams in the intermittent sun breaking through clouds, its dampness evolving into a vaporous shroud that carries the acrid scent higher, blending with the cries that fade into whimpers as dusk approaches. Empathy lingers for the rooted, their retreat a stumbling horror through arrow-riddled fields, a sad procession that tugs at you despite the lines drawn, as night cloaks the dead in merciful shadow. The walls of nearby abbeys loom distant and indifferent, their spires piercing the twilight like accusatory fingers, a strange visual that sends a psychological chill racing through you. What echoes of this hollow glory will linger to haunt the sieges yet to come? Plague-ridden winds carry the foul stench of death through empty villages, whipping at your face with a clammy gust that reeks of rotting flesh and despair, each breath drawing in the putrid sweetness of decay that coats your tongue like a film of spoiled milk, making you gag involuntarily as if the air itself is poisoned nectar from some vengeful god, and you stumble along the deserted cart path, your boots crunching over brittle bones scattered like forgotten dice, the bones of villagers who dropped mid-stride, their skin blackened and bubbled in grotesque patterns that historians still debate were caused by septicemic fever, or just the body's final, sarcastic rebellion against an invisible invader that turned Europe into a charnel house between 1347 and 1351, wiping out perhaps a third of the continent's souls in a statistical horror that makes modern pandemics seem like mild inconveniences. You feel the wet wool of your hood dank from the perpetual mist rolling off fever-swollen rivers clinging to your forehead like a funeral shroud, its fibers matted with sweat and grime that mutates the familiar dampness into a sticky veil pressing against your feverish skin, chafing your neck raw as you shiver uncontrollably, the sensory struggle of chills racing through your body despite the summer heat. Bones aching as if hollowed out by the same pestilence that empties these hamlets, where doors hang ajar on silent hinges, creaking like accusatory whispers in the wind. A physical event seizes you as you push into an abandoned cottage, the door splintering under your shoulder with a crack that echoes through the void, and inside, the sight hits like a hammer, bodies piled in corners, swollen and leaking, a family frozen in their last agonies. The father's hand outstretched toward a crust of bread now crawling with flies that buzz in your ears like tiny judgments, forcing you to retch onto the straw floor, the vomit mixing with the filth in a shocking tableau that pricks your empathy deeper than any arrow from Crecy. A sad dissolution of human bonds where mothers clutch children in vain against the unseen reaper. The absurd tidbit flickers in your mind amid the horror. How desperate healers prescribed posies of herbs stuffed in beak-like masks to ward off miasma. Those bird-faced doctors waddling through streets like macabre crows. Though scholars argue if it filtered anything or just masked the stench long enough to collect their fees, mutating the iron taste on your teeth now soured by bile into something floral and false. like chewing rose petals in a graveyard. Sarcasm curls your thoughts as you back away, thinking, the divine punishment card, halting human folly mid-war because nothing says omnipotent mercy like blanketing battlefields with buboes. Worse than a cosmic IT guy rebooting the server during peak hours, leaving kings and peasants alike scrambling for passwords to paradise. You zoom out poetically, the village dissolving into a vast quilt of forsaken fields where crops rot unharvested, a silent testament to nature's indifferent reclaiming. The horizon, a blurred line of smoke from distant pyres, rising like unanswered questions to an uncaring sky. Revisiting Philip Sick from the Paris court's fraying tapestries, his figure surprises here not as the crowned usurper, but a humbled survivor, fleeing his own plague-stricken court to isolated chateaux, a twist that mutates his iron-fisted rule into frantic isolation, his alliances crumbling as the pestilence respects no borders, turning wool trade wars into irrelevant echoes amid mass graves. The torchlight motif mutates into the feeble glow of rushlights in shuttered windows you pass, their flames sputtering through cracks like dying stars, casting pallid shadows that dance weakly on plague carts rumbling by, laden with the dead whose limbs dangle like broken promises. A modern comparison strikes as you wrap a cloth over your nose, this isolation feeling like lockdown scrolling through endless doom feeds. No Zoom calls to bridge the void, just the creeping dread of who falls next in this lottery of lungs. Another sarcastic jab bubbles up. What a twist. The war's pause button pressed by fleas on rats' backs, because humanity's grand ambitions bow to something smaller than a breadcrumb, no grander than forgetting to wash your hands after a bad taco. The cold dread chills your bones with feverish isolation, sweat beading despite the shivers, empathy welling for the orphaned child you spot huddled in a doorway, eyes hollow with loss, a sad spectre that tugs at your heart like the wind's relentless pull. As you flee the village, the winds howl stronger, carrying echoes of distant bells tolling for the departed, their peals mutating into a dirge that haunts your steps. The path ahead shrouded in mist that swirls like accusing spirits, leaving a psychological chill that whispers, what if this divine sarcasm isn't punishment but a cruel intermission? Halting folly only to let it resume with renewed vengeance. Captive chains rattle in Poitiers' golden fields, the iron links clinking with a dull rhythm that echoes through your wrists like the heartbeat of defeat, each movement sending jolts of raw abrasion against your skin where the metal has bitten in, leaving welts that ooze and sting with every shift, and the sun beats down mercilessly on the waving wheat, turning the air into a shimmering haze that bakes your sweat-soaked body. The heat mutating the familiar wet wool of your tabard now crusted with dirt and dried blood into a stifling cocoon that traps moisture against your flesh, chafing your underarms and back into fiery irritation as if the fabric itself resents your captivity, pricking your sense of fairness with the filthy greed that clings to this victory's cruel price. You taste the iron on your teeth sharpened into a coppery bitterness, like swallowing pennies dipped in vinegar, evolving from the battlefield's acrid smoke into the tang of humiliation as you trudge in the line of prisoners, ropes binding your hands to those of fellow knights whose armour, once gleaming symbols of prowess, now hangs dented and heavy, weighing you down more than any physical burden, the sensory struggle of blistered feet pounding the dusty path where golden stalks bend mockingly under the breeze, whispering accusations of folly in this 1356 debacle. A physical event yanks you forward as the English guards prod with spear butts, one jabbing your side with a thud that bruises ribs already sore from the melee, forcing you to stagger and catch yourself on a comrade's shoulder, his chainmail links pressing cold and unyielding against your palm, the jolt sending fresh pain radiating up your arm while shouts in guttural English fill the air. Their victory cries a shocking cacophony that drowns the moans of the wounded littering the fields like discarded harvest sheaves. The factual moment unfolds in the aftermath of September 19th, where John II of France led a massive force against the Black Prince's raiders, only to be outflanked and overwhelmed by disciplined longbow volleys and dismounted tactics, resulting in the king's capture, a rarity that stunned Europe. Historians still debating if John's chivalric insistence on leading charges personally was heroic valour or reckless hubris that cost thousands their freedom, much like a CEO charging into a market crash without backup plans, leaving shareholders in chains. Sarcasm slithers through your thoughts as you glance at the royal pavilion ahead, where John kneels before his captor, thinking, the splendour of royal ransom, 3 million gold crowns demanded for one man's release, because nothing says fair exchange like bankrupting a kingdom for a crown that slipped through fingers greased by overconfidence. Worse than haggling over a used car only to find out the engine's seized and the sellers grinning all the way to the bank. The absurd tidbit emerges as a guard tosses you a water skin laced with weak ale, reminding you how medieval prisoners sometimes fashion makeshift dice from sheep knuckle bones to gamble away their meagre possessions while awaiting ransom, a futile distraction that turned captivity into a bizarre casino of despair, though scholars argue if it built camaraderie or just deepened resentments among the chained. You zoom out lyrically, the golden fields expanding into a vast amber sea undulating under the autumn sun, where individual fates dissolve into the broader current of war's insatiable hunger. The horizon, a blurred edge where ambition meets its gilded grave. A shocking element clutches at you as you spot the French king's son, the Dauphin, fleeing the field earlier, leaving his father to fate's mercy, a sad betrayal that pricks your loyalty like a thorn in the heart. Empathy surging for John, whose capture not only humiliates but fractures his realm into regency squabbles. Families torn by the greed that turns kin against kin for scraps of power. The modern comparison bites as you adjust the chains. This ransom game feeling like crowdfunding a bailout for a failed startup founder. Donors ponying up millions while the workers get laid off. No equity in sight for the pawns. Another sarcastic jab rises. What a bargain. Victory's cruel price where English pockets bulge with French gold, because profiting from a king's misfortune is peak chivalry. No shadier than those infomercials promising riches for a small investment that bankrupts the buyer. Revisiting Edward III from the Sly's Harbour's Arrowstorm, his presence surprises here not as the naval victor, but the distant architect of this land triumph. His son's Black Prince executing the raid that nets this prize, a twist mutating Edward's channel mastery into continental dominance, his strategic shadow lengthening over Poitiers like an approving spectre that nods at the hall. The torchlight motif mutates into the setting sun's fiery glare, casting long shadows across the fields where campfires begin to spark, their flames licking at the dusk like tentative tongues tasting the night's chill, illuminating faces etched with exhaustion and avarice. The wet wool dries unevenly in the heat, its dampness evolving into stiff patches that crackle with movement, carrying the mingled scents of sweat and earth that cling like regrets. Empathy lingers for the captive king, his dignity stripped amid the haggling, a sad figure reduced to bargaining chip in this filthy transaction. As guards herd you toward tents ringed by watchful archers, the golden fields fade to twilight bronze, their stalks whispering secrets to the wind, a strange visual of harvest moons rising like bloated ransoms unpaid, sending a psychological chill that wonders how heavy must the armor of greed grow before it crushes those who wear it. Madness creeps like icy fingers through the French court's opulent shadows, slithering up your spine with a chill that seeps into your marrow despite the roaring hearths, their flames crackling with false warmth that fails to dispel the clammy dread pooling in your gut. And the air thickens with the heavy perfume of incense masking underlying rot, a cloying sweetness that turns sour on your inhale, making your head spin as if the very walls of the Louvre Palace in the 1390s are closing in, whispering delusions that mirror the king's fracturing mind. You taste the iron on your teeth now twisted into a cloying sweetness laced with bile, like sipping from a chalice poisoned by unseen hands, evolving from battlefield corrosion into courtly venom that coats your palate as you navigate the gilded halls, where tapestries depict heroic ancestors but sag with the weight of dampness from leaking roofs. The wet wool of your doublet imbued with the perpetual Parisian fog clinging to your chest like a shroud, woven from paranoia, its fibres mutating into a prickly barrier that itches with every anxious breath, chafing your skin raw as civil strife tears at your loyalties, painful divisions slicing through alliances like knives through silk. A physical event erupts as Charles convulses in a grand chamber, his eyes wild and unfocused during one of his fits, lunging at you a lowly attendant with a drawn dagger that whistles past your ear, the blade nicking your collar and drawing a thin line of blood that warms your neck before cooling into sticky trails. forcing you to dodge and grapple with guards who restrain the mad king, his screams echoing off marble like shattered glass, the struggle leaving bruises blooming on your arms that throb in rhythm with your racing heart. The factual moment weaves in as this 1392 episode marks the onset of Charles's intermittent insanity, possibly schizophrenia or porphyria as historians debate, triggered by a forest ambush that left him paranoid and violent, fracturing the Valois dynasty and plunging France into the Armagnac-Burgundian Civil War, where factions led by his brother Louis of Orleans and cousin John the Fearless vie for regency, turning kin into enemies in a power vacuum that devours the realm, much like a boardroom coup where executives backstab for the CEO's chair while the company burns. Sarcasm slithers through your panic as you wipe the blood, thinking, the fragile sanity of crowned heads, where divine right apparently includes bouts of homicidal lunacy, because nothing stabilizes a kingdom like a king who thinks his courtiers are demons in disguise. Worse than a boss having a meltdown during a team meeting and firing emails like arrows, the absurd tidbit flickers amid the chaos, how royal physicians prescribed baths in ass's milk to soothe the king's rages, a lavish folly involving herds of donkeys milked daily, though scholars argue if it calmed nerves or just enriched opportunistic farmers, mutating the wet wool's discomfort into a milky residue that slicks your hands from helping restrain him. You zoom out lyrically, the court dissolving into a labyrinth of mirrored ambitions where shadows lengthen into infinite regressions. A hall of illusions reflecting Europe's splintering soul under the weight of endless strife. A shocking element clutches at you as news spreads of the Bal des Ardents in 1393, where Charles and his companions, dressed as wild men in flammable costumes, catch fire during a masque, four burning alive in screams that haunt your nights. A sad spectacle of royal frivolity turned tragedy that pricks your empathy for the scorched survivors, their agony a metaphor for the kingdom's self-inflicted wounds. The modern comparison strikes as you flee the chamber, this civil strife feeling like a toxic family group chat exploding into blocks and unfollows, no escape from the notifications of betrayal pinging endlessly. Another sarcastic jab rises, what elegant mockery. Loyalties torn between Armagnacs claiming royal purity and Burgundians wielding economic might from Flemish cloths. Because dividing a nation is always wiser than uniting against the English wolves at the door. No smarter than splitting a winning lottery ticket only to sue each other over the scraps. Revisiting Joan of Arc from Whispers of Future Voices. Her spectral presence surprises here not as the saviour yet to come, but a faint echo in the madness. Her divine calls a twisted parallel to Charles's hallucinations, mutating his crowned fragility into a harbinger of peasant prophecies that will one day heal what royalty rends. The torchlight motif mutates into the flickering candles of vigil masses held for the king's lucidity, their flames wavering like uncertain faiths, casting pallid glows on faces etched with fear where shadows hollow cheeks into masks of desperation. The wet wool dries fitfully by a side hearth, its dampness evolving into stiff folds that crackle with tension, carrying the mingled scents of fierce sweat and burnt resin that cling like accusations. Empathy lingers for the queen, Isabeau, navigating this bedlam with calculated affairs, a sad figure vilified as the Bavarian witch for survival tactics in a court of vipers. As guards usher you into the antechamber, the opulent shadows deepen into velvet voids, their depths hiding daggers drawn in secret pacts. A strange visual of gilded frames enclosing portraits that seem to watch with knowing eyes, sending a psychological chill that questions how thin the veil between sanity and strife, and what painful divisions await when madness wears the crown. Welsh mists envelop you in rebellious whispers, swirling around your form like ghostly veils that chill your skin with a clammy touch, each tendril seeping through your clothing to raise gooseflesh in waves that make you shudder uncontrollably, as if the very fog is alive with the grievances of a conquered land, biting deeper than any arrow with the cold injustice of forgotten oaths and trampled freedoms. And the air hangs heavy with the earthy scent of peat and damp heather, a musty breath that fills your lungs with a weighty oppression, forcing shallow gasps that fog your vision further in this labyrinth of valleys, where visibility shrinks to arm's length, the sensory struggle intensifying as droplets condense on your lashes, blurring the jagged outlines of craggy hills that loom like silent sentinels judging your every step. You taste the iron on your teeth now infused with a peaty bitterness, like chewing on sodden turf laced with rust from ancient battle axes buried beneath, evolving from courtly venom into a wild, untamed sharpness that grounds you in this rugged terrain of 1400s Wales, where rebellion simmers under English rule, your boots sinking into boggy ground that sucks at your heels with greedy slurps, the wet wool of your cloak laden with mist-turned rain hanging like a sodden burden that pulls your shoulders down, chafing against your neck with fibres that have mutated into prickly thorns from constant abrasion, while whispers of Welsh voices carry on the wind, tales of Owain Glyndwr, the self-proclaimed Prince of Wales, rallying clans against Henry IV's usurpation, his uprising a factual flame ignited in 1400 after a land dispute escalated into full revolt. Historians still debating whether Glyndwr's crowning at Machynlleth in 1404 was genuine sovereignty, or romantic nationalism retrofitted by later bards. Much like how indigenous leaders today reclaim heritage against colonial echoes, in a world that still draws borders with indifferent ink. A physical event jolts you as arrows, Welsh longbows singing their own dirge whiz from the mist-shrouded tree line. One embedding in the ground inches from your foot with a thud that vibrates up your leg, splintering wood and forcing you to dive into a bracken-filled ditch where thorns tear at your hands in shocking bursts of pain, blood welling up warm and sticky to mix with the mud. Your heart hammering as English patrols clash with rebels in a frenzy of steel and shouts. The cold injustice pricking deeper as you witness a forgotten prince like Glyndwr, descended from ancient Welsh royalty, dancing this sarcastic waltz of resistance against the Lancastrian king who seized the throne from Richard II in 1399. His rule a precarious throne built on betrayal that now faces Celtic fury. Sarcasm curls your thoughts amid the skirmish. Ah, the dance of usurpers and forgotten princes, where Henry IV promises stability but delivers endless raids, because nothing unites a realm like torching villages and taxing the survivors into submission. Worse than a politician vowing change only to recycle the same old scandals in a fresh election cycle. The absurd tidbit surfaces as you crawl through the undergrowth, thorns snagging your wool in painful tugs, reminding you how Welsh rebels sometimes used Simdunanan, mythical hellhounds from folklore to terrify English troops with staged howls in the night. A psychological ploy that turned mists into haunted vales, though scholars argue if it was effective guerrilla theatre or just amplified by superstitious chroniclers eager for drama. You zoom out poetically, the misty valleys expanding into an emerald shroud where human struggles fade into the timeless roll of hills, a living canvas where conquest's brushstrokes bleed into rebellion's defiant hues, the horizon lost in vapour like dreams deferred. A shocking element grips you as a rebel fighter falls nearby, arrow-pierced and gurgling his last, his eyes locking on yours with a plea that chills your core, empathy surging for this forgotten soul, fighting for a Wales free from English yokes. A sad echo of princes like Llewellyn the Last, executed centuries prior, whose legacy fuels this fire, pricking your conscience with the injustice of cultures crushed under boot heels that promise civilization but deliver chains. The modern comparison strikes as you press a cloth to a shallow gash from a stray blade. This rebellion feeling like a grassroots crowdfunding campaign against a corporate giant. No matching funds from the establishment, just passion and pitchforks against armoured might in a world where underdogs bark loud but bite seldom wins. Another sarcastic jab rises what elegant footwork in this dance. Henry IV for juggling Welsh uprisings with Percy revolts back home, because usurping a throne is easy, but holding it against forgotten princes is like herding cats with a crown of thorns. No smoother than navigating office politics where the intern plots your downfall over bad coffee. Revisiting Bertrand du Guesclin from the Poitiers fields, his guerrilla shadow surprises here not as the French constable evading English bows but inspiring trans-channel resistance. His tactics of harassment echoing in Glyndwr's ambushes, a twist that mutates his continental cunning into a template for Celtic defiance, linking French madness to Welsh mists in a web of anti-English fervour. The torchlight motif mutates into the dim glow of hidden campfires glimpsed through fog, their flames muffled by damp wood that smokes more than burns, casting hazy auras on rebel faces where shadows carve determination into fierce masks. The wet wool steams faintly as you huddle near one such fire during a lull, its dampness evolving into a vaporous cloak that carries the earthy scent mingled with wood smoke, clinging like the persistent whispers of independence that fuel these nights. Empathy lingers for the displaced families fleeing torched steadings, their sad plight a human cost buried under grand narratives of crowns contested. As dawn pierces the mists with pale fingers, revealing crags etched like ancient runes, their forms twisting in the light into strange sentinels guarding secrets, a visual that sends a psychological chill racing through you. How long can this sarcastic dance whirl before the music of conquest drowns the whispers forever? Halfler's siege walls press against your fevered brow, the rough stone scraping your forehead like the unyielding hand of fate itself, cold and unfeeling despite the sweat beading there from the relentless August heat of 1415, and you lean into it for a moment's support as another wave of dysentery twists your guts into agonizing knots. A visceral cramp that doubles you over with a gasp, forcing bitter bile up your throat where it mixes with the iron taste on your teeth. Now, mutated into a foul, coppery sludge laced with the sour tang of infection, as if your body is rebelling against the very air you breathe in this Norman port-turned-hellish prison. The stench of overflowing latrines wafting up from the trenches below. A putrid cocktail of excrement and decay that clings to your nostrils like an unwelcome parasite, making each inhale a laboured battle against nausea that leaves you retching dryly into the dirt. You feel the wet wool of your tunic drenched in a vile stew of sweat, rain, and bodily fluids sticking to your abdomen like a second, festering skin that peels away in painful layers with every twist of pain, its fibres chafing against inflamed flesh where rashes bloom from the constant damp, mutating the familiar discomfort into a throbbing torment that radiates through your core, while the fever burns behind your eyes, blurring the siege lines into a hazy nightmare where English tents sprawl like weary beasts under the relentless sun, their canvas sagging with moisture that drips incessantly, pooling in muddy puddles that suck at your boots with greedy slurps as you stagger toward the water ration, your mouth parched despite the humidity that hangs heavy like a shroud. A physical event wrenches you as a comrade collapses nearby, his body convulsing in the filth, dysentery claiming another victim in this prelude to greater slaughter, and you rush to his side only to be shoved back by medics wielding crude lancets, their blades slicing into his arm for bloodletting in a shocking spray of crimson that splatters your boots. The warm droplets cooling rapidly into sticky spots that mingle with the mud, forcing you to confront the sad futility of it all as his eyes glaze over in delirium, empathy surging through your weakened frame for this yeoman archer who crossed the channel dreaming of glory, now reduced to a quivering shell in the prelude to Agincourt, where mud and malice will blend into legendary but hollow triumph. The factual moment folds in naturally as Henry V's invasion fleet landed here weeks ago, his 12,000 men encircling Harfleur's formidable walls with siege engines that pound rhythmically like a giant's heartbeat, trebuchets hurling stones that crash with thunderous roars, breaching sections in a grinding assault that historians still debate was worth the cost nearly a third of the army felled by disease before the town surrendered on September 22nd, transforming a quick victory into a Pyrrhic drain that sapped strength for the march ahead. Much like how a startup burns through venture capital on a flashy launch, only to limp into the market underfunded and exhausted. Sarcasm whispering that Henry's divine right apparently didn't include immunity to the trots, because nothing humbles a conquering king like his army shitting itself to death in the ditches. The absurd tidbit flickers through your delirium as a barber surgeon approaches with a pouch of leeches, their slimy bodies wriggling against your arm in a fascinating horror before latching on with tiny pricks that draw blood in rhythmic pulses. Medieval medics believing they balanced the humours disrupted by foul airs, though scholars argue if this treatment saved lives or just weakened the already frail, mutating the iron taste in your mouth into a leechy slimminess that coats your tongue like regret for ever enlisting in this amphibious folly. You zoom out poetically for a breath, the siege work sprawling into a vast ring of earth and timber under the Norman sky, a man-made scar on the landscape where individual sufferings merge into the broader tapestry of ambition's cruel weave. The horizon, a blurred line of channel waves mocking the invaders with their indifferent crash. Sarcasm bubbles up amid the cramps. Oh, the chilling prelude to legendary slaughter, where Henry's harangue speeches rally the troops with St. Crispin's Day, flair yet to come. But for now, it's all bowels and bedpans, because nothing prepares you for war's glory like hugging a bucket in the trenches, worse than a bad festival porta-potty line where the music's drowned out by groans. A modern comparison hits as you sip tepid water from a shared flask. This dysentery siege feeling like a team-building retreat gone horribly wrong. All trust falls into latrine pits and motivational talks over vomiting. No escape pod back to the office cubicle where at least the coffee doesn't kill you. Another light commentary slips in what elegant malice in the mud. Henry's insistence on taking Harfleur as a gateway to Normandy mirroring Edward III's Calais obsession from decades past, but with added intestinal twists that turn chivalric dreams into nightmarish evacuations, no grander than scrolling through health forums at 3 a.m. diagnosing your own doom. Revisiting Edward III from the Crecy smoke's acrid grip. His spectral legacy surprises here as Henry's grandsire. His longbow tactics echoed in the archers manning the lines, a twist that mutates his muddy victory into this prelude's diseased echo, where bows now guard against sorties while fever claims more than swords. The torchlight motif mutates into the smoky haze of siege fires dotting the encampment, their flames guttering in the damp air like feverish delusions, casting wavering shadows on pallid faces where eyes hollow into sockets of exhaustion, illuminating the painful wait for surrender that finally comes after a month. But at what cost empathy wells for the garrison, expelled barefoot into the wilderness? Their gaunt forms a sad procession mirroring your own hollowed comrades, pricking your heart with the shared humanity lost in war's calculus. As you muster for the march to Calais, weakened but resolute, the walls of Harfleur loom behind like a conquered beast panting its last, their breached stones weeping mortar in the rain. A strange visual of jagged teeth grinning defeat that sends a psychological chill racing through you. What legendary slaughter awaits in the mud ahead, where malice brews stronger than any fever. Rain-soaked fields at Agincourt swallow your every step, the mud sucking greedily at your boots like a living quagmire determined to pull you under, each laborious lift sending splatters of cold, viscous earth flying up to speckle your legs and face with gritty flecks that sting like tiny accusations, and the relentless downpour drums against your helm with a monotonous patter that drowns out all but the closest shouts, water cascading down your neck in icy rivulets that seep through every seam of your armour, chilling your skin to numbness while the fever from Harfleur's lingering grip burns inwardly, creating a torturous duality where you're both frozen and aflame, the sensory struggle intensifying as dysentery's ghost twists faintly in your gut, a reminder of the prelude's malice now blending with this mud's merciless embrace. You taste the iron on your teeth sharpened into a muddy slurry, like swallowing soil laced with blood from bitten lips, evolving from the siege's foul copper into something primal and earthen, biting back with every laboured breath as you trudge forward in the English line. The longbow slung across your back heavy with rain-swollen strings that you pray will still sing true, while the wet wool beneath your mail, sodden to the point of saturation, clings like a parasitic lover, its weight dragging at your limbs and chafing thighs raw with every sloshing advance, mutating from mere discomfort into a suffocating second skin that amplifies the sting of outnumbered despair. Your force of perhaps 6,000 facing a French host rumoured at 25,000, their banners fluttering defiantly across the narrow field flanked by woods. A tactical chokehold that Henry V exploits with grim precision. Dismounted men-at-arms in the centre flanked by archers staked against cavalry. The air thick with the scent of wet leather and horse sweat mingling into a pungent fog that clogs your nostrils, making each inhale a battle against revulsion. A physical event erupts as the French cavalry charges, their hooves thundering through the muck in a spray of filth that blinds you momentarily, and you loose your first arrow with a twang that vibrates up your arm like a harp string plucked in fury, the shaft arcing into the mass where it finds a mark, a knight's mount impaling on defensive stakes with a screech that pierces the din, the rider tumbling into the quagmire where English blades await, but one charger breaks through, its flank brushing your position in a glancing blow that knocks you sideways into the mud, the impact jarring your shoulder with a crack of pain that radiates hot and sharp, mud filling your mouth as you sputter and rise, spitting out the gritty slurry while comrades haul you up, the chaos swirling around in a melee of flailing limbs and flashing steel. the shocking element gripping you as bodies pile in heaps, French nobles trampling their own footmen in the press, a sad frenzy where chivalry's code dissolves into desperate survival, empathy welling for these armoured lords reduced to wallowing beasts in the filth, their dreams of glory drowned in the very earth they sought to claim, pricking your heart with the waste of it all as a young squire nearby falls gurgling from a bodkin through his gorget, his eyes wide with betrayed innocence. The factual moment naturally embeds as October 25th, 1415 unfolds in this lopsided triumph. Henry's depleted army after Harfleur's toll facing Constable Charles d'Albret's superior force, yet English tactics, longbows raining volleys at point blank, men-at-arms holding the line turn numerical disadvantage into slaughter, claiming perhaps 6,000 French dead against a few hundred English, historians still arguing whether the mud's role in slowing charges or the stake's defensive genius was the true decider, much like how a small tech firm outmaneuvers a giant through agile innovation in a market flooded with bloated competitors. Sarcasm whispering that it's also ironically triumphant, the flower of French nobility wilting in English rain, because nothing mocks chivalric demise like peasants with bows turning knights into pincushions. Worse than a viral underdog story where the little guy memes the bully into oblivion, the absurd tidbit flashes amid the arrow storm. How some English archers wrapped their bowstrings in intestines for waterproofing, a gory craft using gut from slaughtered livestock to keep the cords taut in downpours, though scholars debate if this was widespread or a chronicler's exaggeration to glorify the yeoman's ingenuity, mutating the wet wool's torment into a visceral reminder of battlefield hacks born from necessity. Your own fingers numb as you knock another shaft, the string biting into calluses that split and bleed, warm trickles down your palm, blending with the rain to slick your grip perilously. You zoom out for a poetic interlude, the field expanding into a vast, rain-veiled canvas where individual clashes blur into a symphony of despair. The woods on either flank like silent witnesses framing humanity's folly. The horizon lost in sheets of grey that weep endlessly for the fallen. Another moment of clever commentary slips in as you witness a French wave falter, crossbowmen outranged and trampled by their own knight's impatience. What a dirge for chivalry's painful end. Longbows humming like a choir of reapers, each volley a stanza in the obituary of armoured charges. No more poignant than watching a blockbuster franchise flop because the stars forgot the script calls for evolution, not repetition. Revisiting Henry V from Harfleur's fevered walls, his figure surprises here not as the besieged conqueror but the inspirational commander dismounted among you, sword in hand and voice rallying with cries that cut through the rain, a twist that mutates his royal poise into everyman's grit, sharing the mud and malice as arrows fly, his presence a beacon in the storm that steels your resolve amid the outnumbered despair yielding to this ironic triumph, where the weak devour the strong. The torchlight motif mutates into the sporadic flashes of gunpowder from primitive handgunners on the French side, their booms like thunderclaps that sputter in the wet, casting brief, hellish glows on contorted faces where shadows leap like demons celebrating the carnage, illuminating eyes wide with terror or resolve in fleeting bursts that fade back to grey obscurity. The wet wool evolves further, now a sodden mass infused with mud and blood that squelches with every movement, its dampness turning to a chilling paste that numbs your extremities while the fever simmers low, carrying the mingled scents of earth, iron, and fierce sweat that permeate the air like a pervasive fog of humanity's basest instincts. Empathy lingers for the French prisoners stripped of arms and herded like cattle, their noble bearings shattered into humbled postures, a sad procession that tugs at you despite the lines of enmity, pricking with the shared fragility of men caught in king's games. As the rain eases to a drizzle, the field reveals its toll in heaps of armoured dead. Longbows silent now, but their hum echoing in memory as a dirge that heralds chivalry's twilight, the mud claiming bodies like trophies in its greedy maw. A light sarcastic aside bubbles up amid the exhaustion, victory's ironic flavour tasting like mud pie after a gourmet feast promised but undelivered. Because triumph on an empty stomach and weary legs is nature's way of reminding you, glory's just another word for survival with extras. No fancier than winning a marathon only to find the medal's chocolate and melts in your hand. The academic uncertainty arises in whispers among the ranks. Scholars later pondering if Henry's order to kill prisoners mid-battle was pragmatic fear of a rally, or a war crime stain on his halo, debated endlessly in tomes that romanticize the mud as destiny's stage. Another modern aside strikes as you sling your bow, this outnumbered win feeling like a startup hackathon, where the underfunded team codes a killer app while the big players crash from overconfidence. No sweeter revenge than watching Goliath slip in their own hype. The physical toll mounts as you help drag a wounded comrade to the lines, his weight pulling at your strained muscles in painful heaves, the mud resisting every effort like a jealous lover unwilling to release its hold, your breaths coming in ragged gasps that fog the cooling air. Shocking in its intimacy, a French duke lies nearby, his fine plate armour caked in filth, eyes staring skyward in eternal surprise, a sad emblem of painful demise where birthright bows to bowstrings, empathy flooding for this highborn turned equal in death's democracy. The field's rain-soaked expanse now gleams under breaking clouds, arrows strewn like fallen stars in the muck, their fletching sodden and useless. A strange visual of celestial defeat that sends a psychological chill through you. What ironic triumph lingers when the dirge fades, and mud claims all as equals. The woods whisper back, their leaves rustling in the breeze like pages turning in history's book, mood shifting toward weary elation mixed with foreboding, the march ahead promising more malice in the mud, where chivalry's ghost haunts the victorious steps. You pause to wipe mud from your face, the gesture smearing rather than cleaning, a futile act that mirrors the war's endless cycle, and as the sun peeks through, casting long shadows over the dead, the irony deepens this triumph born from despair. Longbows humming not victory but a requiem for an era, their strings now slack in the damp, waiting for the next prelude to pain. Empathy persists for the vanquished, their painful end a cautionary echo that resonates in your aching bones. The fever subsiding slightly but leaving weakness in its wake, a reminder that survival's price is paid in installments of flesh and spirit. The field quiets, the hum fading to silence broken only by moans and crows' calls, those blackbirds wheeling overhead like opportunistic scribes noting the toll, their shadows crossing your path in ominous patterns that chill deeper than the rain ever could. Sarcasm returns softly, victory's crown weighing heavy with mud, because ironic triumph tastes sweetest when spiced with outnumbered odds. No different from pulling an all-nighter to ace a test you thought you'd fail, only to find the real exam is life itself. As you regroup with the lines, Henry's voice carries faint praise, his figure a beacon amid the wreckage, the woods framing the scene like nature's indifferent theatre, leaves dripping post-rain in rhythmic plops that mimic the blood still seeping from wounds. The psychological chill settles like the mist rising from warm earth, questioning if this dirge signals chivalry's final breath, or just a pause before deeper malice, the mud's embrace lingering on your skin as a tactile memory of despair yielded to triumph, yet hinting at costs yet unpaid. The strange visual persists in the arrow-strewn ground, shafts standing like miniature forests in the muck, fletchings wilted and forlorn, a miniature mimicry of the woods that hemmed the slaughter, pulling your gaze toward the horizon where Calais beckons with false promise. Mood shifting from elation to uneasy anticipation, what awaits in the mud beyond, where irony may yet turn triumph to tragedy. Heavenly voices pierce the siege smoke of Orleans, echoing in your ears like ethereal commands from saints long silent, whispering urgencies that make you question if madness has finally claimed you amid the 1429 desperation, where a peasant girl from Domremy arrives claiming divine mandates to lift the English yoke. Her arrival sparking a turnaround that historians still debate was miraculous intervention or masterful propaganda, turning a 6-month stalemate into a rout in mere days, a statistic that defies logic like a viral underdog story exploding overnight from obscurity to legend. But did you know Joan's voices of Saints Michael, Catherine, and Margaret weren't unique in medieval mysticism, yet hers ignited a national fervour that reversed a war's tide, raising the intriguing puzzle of how one illiterate teenager's conviction outshone seasoned generals' strategies. You stand amid the filth of the besieged city's streets, the acrid smoke from English cannonades stinging your eyes with a burning haze that blurs the world into ghostly shapes, each inhale drawing in the choking blend of gunpowder and rotting refuse that coats your lungs like tar. forcing coughs that rack your frame and leave your throat raw, while the ground underfoot squelches with a vile mixture of mud, sewage, and discarded waste from overflowing gutters, sucking at your boots in greedy pulls that make every step a laboured fight against the quagmire's embrace. The sensory struggle deepening as dysentery's lingering grip from distant fields twists faintly in your belly, a nauseous churn that threatens to double you over, your body weakened by rations thinned to gruel that tastes of despair and faint mould, the wet wool of your simple tunic drenched in the Loire's misty spray, and the sweat of fear clings to your torso like a clammy shroud that won't release its hold, its fibres mutating from mere dampness into a prickly torment infused with the grime of unwashed days, chafing your arms and back raw where the constant rub against makeshift armour leaves welts that itch with fiery insistence, while the iron on your teeth evolves into a smoky bitterness, like biting into charred bread laced with the metallic tang of blood from a split lip earned in a recent skirmish, grounding you in this desperate reality where hope flickers as faintly as the torches sputtering in the wind along the ramparts. A physical event surges as Joan rides in on her white horse, banner unfurled with the image of Christ that flaps like a divine challenge, and you join the crowd surging toward her, pushed by the press of bodies that smell of unwashed desperation and faint incense from hurried prayers, her voice cutting through the din with a clarity that shocks you, rallying the defenders to assault the English Bastille of Les Tourelles, and you find yourself clambering up a scaling ladder amid arrow hail, a shaft grazing your shoulder with a fiery slice that draws blood warm and sticky down your arm, the pain jolting you like a saint's rebuke, forcing you to grip the rung tighter as Frenchmen around you fall with thuds into the moat below, their splashes mingling with cries that echo the unjust flames of this holy war turned heretical spark. The factual moment naturally unfolds as May 4th-8 sees Joan's forces reclaim the outlying fortifications, her presence transforming demoralised troops into zealots who breach the walls where English longbows from Cressy's muddy triumph once dominated. But here French artillery and sheer fervour prevail, historians arguing whether her tactical acumen insisting on immediate attacks, despite fatigue or the psychological boost of her divine aura, was the key, much like how a charismatic CEO turns a failing company around not with spreadsheets, but with visionary pep talks that inspire overtime miracles, sarcasm whispering that it's also elegantly ironic. A girl in armour leading men to victory while kings dither in madness from Paris courts past, because nothing flips a siege like Heavenly Hotline calls overriding earthly generals, worse than a startup pivot based on a dream that actually pays off against venture capital skepticism. The absurd tidbit flickers in your mind amid the clamour. How Joan refused traditional female garb for male attire not just for practicality, but to avoid temptation, a custom rooted in Deuteronomy's prohibitions that turned her practicality into ammunition for later heresy charges. Though scholars debate if this cross-dressing was strategic camouflage or genuine ascetic choice, mutating the wet wool's torment into a symbolic barrier against gender norms that chafe as painfully as the fabric itself against your skin. You zoom out for a poetic interlude, the siege smoke rising into a vast pillar that blots the Loire's silvery flow, where individual acts of valour dissolve into the broader current of destiny's river, the horizon a smudged line of English tents like weary sentinels guarding fading empire dreams, the city walls standing defiant like ancient bones refusing to yield. A shocking element clutches at you as Joan takes an arrow to the shoulder during the assault, blood blooming on her white standard like a crimson rose of martyrdom, yet she pulls it free and charges on, her pain a sad testament to mortal frailty beneath divine claims, empathy surging for this teenager thrust into war's maw, her trembling hand guided by voices that might be heavens or hallucinations, pricking your heart with the injustice of youth, bearing burdens kings shirk, a flame of hope kindled amid heresy accusations that already brew in ecclesiastical shadows. The modern comparison strikes as you storm the Bastille, this peasant-led rally feeling like a grassroots social media campaign toppling a corporate giant, no budget, but pure viral conviction spreading faster than algorithms can suppress. No mightier than a TikTok trend that mobilizes millions against establishment inertia. Another moment of light sarcasm slips in what unjust flames these, where a girl's fire ignites hope while bishops plot heresy trials from safe cloisters, because nothing threatens the church like a woman hearing God without their permission. no subtler than a boardroom barring innovators for not following protocol. The desperation's filth, mutating into a baptismal mud that coats you as you fight, whispers turning to roars of "for God and France" that drown English taunts from the walls. Revisiting Charles VI from the court's opulent madness, his fractured mind surprises here as the Dauphin, now Charles VII, lurks in Chinon. His inaction, a twist that mutates paternal insanity into filial hesitation. Joan's arrival forcing him from apathy to anointing, his shadow hovering like a reluctant spectator finally stepping into the light she ignites. The torchlight motif mutates into the bonfires lit along the riverbank to guide nocturnal assaults, their flames reflecting on the Loire in dancing orange ripples like heavenly signals mirrored in earthly waters, casting glows on faces etched with fervent belief where shadows carve doubt into fleeting masks. The wet wool dries patchily in the night's chill after the day's exertion, its dampness evolving into stiff folds crusted with siege dust that crackle with movement, carrying the mingled scents of smoke, sweat, and river mist that permeate the air like a pervasive aura of rebirth. Empathy lingers for the English garrison, their long-held positions crumbling under this inspired onslaught. A sad reversal where besiegers become besieged, pricking with the shared humanity of soldiers far from home. Dreams of Calais ports from Agincourt's mud now dashed in all in smoke. As you crest the Tourelle's ramparts, Joan beside you with banner aloft. The city cheers, rising like a tidal wave that washes away months of despair. The flames of her hope spreading like wildfire through the streets. A strange visual of illuminated faces emerging from cellars like resurrected souls that sends a psychological chill through you. What heresy lurks in this holy fire, and how will the unjust flames consume those who fan them? The river below glimmers with reflected torches, its waters swirling in eddies that mimic the twisting paths of fate, mood shifting from triumphant exultation to wary anticipation, the voices fading slightly as dawn approaches, leaving questions hanging in the smoke like unanswered prayers. You pause atop the captured Bastille, the wind tugging at your wool with fresh whispers, the siege smoke thinning to reveal stars winking through. Their light a distant echo of heavenly guidance that Joan claims. But in this moment of victory, doubt creeps in like the returning chill. The absurdity of it all, a girl's fire against Empire's might mutating triumph into tentative hope. Sarcasm whispering that divine interventions come with fine print, no clearer than a contract signed in blood under flickering light. The factual depth expands as Joan's strategy, insisting on attacking the weakest point despite advisors' caution, proves prescient. Her removal from the field for wounding, only to return inspiring a final push that shatters English resolve, the Earl of Suffolk surrendering with terms that spare lives but cede the bridge, a turning point that revives French morale and begins the reconquest. Academic uncertainty lingering over whether her voices provided real intelligence or if it was coincidental luck amplified by belief, like a placebo effect on a national scale where faith heals the body's politic. Modern aside deepens the irony. Her leadership akin to a viral influencer rallying followers to storm a digital Bastille. No army but memes and momentum toppling gatekeepers, yet with stakes of flesh and fire rather than likes and shares. The shocking resilience of Joan, bandaged but unbowed, stands as a beacon amid the rubble. Her youthful face alight with conviction that pricks your awe with a mix of admiration and fear. The sad undercurrent of knowing heresy trials loom from inquisitorial shadows from Rouen's future pyre. Empathy for her as a vessel of hope destined for flames that will immortalize rather than extinguish. The torch fires mutate further, their glows reflecting in puddles of rainwater mixed with blood, casting crimson hues on the stones like divine judgments painted in sacrifice, the whispers evolving into chants of Jeanne Jeanne that echo off the walls, pulling you into the throng where bodies press in jubilant crush, the filth of desperation transforming into a baptismal grime washed by tears of relief. As night deepens, the Loire's flow carries away debris from the bridge's collapse, timbers floating like defeated serpents in the current. A strange visual of surrender's flotsam that chills with its symbolism what unjust flames will spread from this ignition, consuming heretics and hopes alike in their purifying blaze. The mood shifts to euphoric exhaustion, your trembling hand steadying on a comrade's shoulder, the voices hers or heaven's fading into the crackle of victory fires. leaving a question lingering like smoke. How long can hope's fire burn before heresy's winds fan it into inferno? The city's bells toll in ragged peals, their notes clashing in joyous discord that reverberates through your chest. The siege smoke finally dissipating to reveal a star-strewn sky where constellations seem to align in approval, yet doubt mutates the triumph. Sarcasm noting that miracles often come with martyrdom's price tag. No cheaper than a lottery win that bankrupts the soul. The academic debate echoes in hushed conversations among captains, pondering if Joan's arrival coincided with English supply shortages, or if her charisma alone tipped the scales. Uncertainty that adds layers to the legend like onions in a stew of history. Modern parallel persists, her peasant fire akin to a whistleblower exposing corporate corruption, igniting public outrage that topples executives, yet facing backlash that brands truth as treason. The shocking vitality of the city reviving, markets reopening amid rubble, pricks with sad joy for survivors who emerge blinking into light, their gaunt frames a testament to endurance's cost. Empathy for Joan deepens, her trembling hand bandaged from the wound guiding yours in a moment of shared resolve, her eyes holding a fervour that chills with its intensity. The unjust flames of her mission burning bright but foreshadowing her own consumption. The torchlight dances on the river, mutating into watery reflections that twist like serpents of doubt. The filth of desperation washing away in the Loire's flow, leaving clean slates etched with hope's fragile script. As you stand watch on the reclaimed walls, the whispers hush to wind sighs, the mood easing into contemplative quiet. The heavenly voices a distant hum that promises more battles but hints at turning tides. The strange visual of dawn's first light gilding the smoke's remnants like aureoles on saints' heads that leaves a psychological chill. What heresy brews when peasants hear heaven and kings tremble. The narrative flows onward, the city's pulse quickening with renewed life. Your role in this ignition a thread in history's tapestry where fire meets fate in eternal dance. Cannon thunder shakes your core at Formigny, the massive recoil vibrating through the earth like the wrath of buried giants awakening. Each boom sending shockwaves up your legs that rattle your teeth and blur your vision in a haze of gunpowder smoke. The acrid blast searing your nostrils with a choking blend of sulphur and charred wood that burns down your throat, forcing coughs that hack up black phlegm tasting of devastation, while the cold recoil of innovation shatters old illusions around you. The French artillery pieces, great bronze serpents belching fire positioned on the hillside dominating the field on April 15th, 1450, where English longbowmen, once kings of battlefields from Crécy's mud, now falter under this new storm, their arrows loosing in futile arcs that fall short against the disciplined French lines, combining cavalry charges with cannon volleys, a factual shift where Charles II's reformed army, professional and artillery-heavy, crushes the remnant English force under Thomas Kyriel, capturing him and routing his men in a defeat that seals Normandy's reconquest. Historians still debating whether the Bureau brothers' gun foundries or the English overextension after decades of occupation was the true decider, much like how a tech disruptor topples a legacy giant not with brute force, but precision innovation that renders old tools obsolete overnight. Sarcasm whispering that it's also poetically cold, empires built on bows crumbling to balls of iron, because nothing pricks empathy like watching archers who humbled knights now humbled by machines. Worse than a veteran coder watching AI automate his life's work while he debugs nostalgia. You feel the wet wool of your hauberk drenched in the Norman drizzle that turns the field into a slippery morass clinging to your chest like a faithless ally turning coat, its fibres mutating from siege dampness into a leaden weight, crusted with gunpowder residue that chafes your ribs with every heaving breath. The sensory struggle deepening as shards of exploded stone from a nearby impact pepper your face like stinging hail, drawing pinpricks of blood that mingle warm with the rain before cooling into sticky trails down your cheeks, your boots sinking ankle-deep in the churned turf where fallen comrades lie twisted, their longbows snapped like broken promises under French hooves, the cold injustice of it all biting deeper than the shrapnel as you nock an arrow with trembling fingers, the string slick and unresponsive in the wet, loosing it toward the advancing French infantry, only to see it deflect harmlessly off plate armor forged in the same foundries that birthed these cannons. A shocking reversal where the yeoman's weapon, once the great equalizer, now whispers inadequacy against the roar of progress. A physical event thunders as a cannonball screams overhead, impacting the English line behind you with a deafening crack that hurls bodies skyward in a spray of mud and limbs. The blast wave slamming into your back like a giant's fist, knocking you face first into the filth where the earth tastes of blood and loam. Your ears ringing with a high-pitched whine that drowns the screams, forcing you to claw your way up gasping, covered in the gore of a nearby archer whose bow arm is mangled beyond recognition. The sad element piercing your core with empathy for this faceless brother-in-arms. A farmer-turned-soldier dreaming of English hearths now extinguished in foreign mud, pricking your heart with the sarcastic fall of illusions where bows bent empires but break under iron's cold logic. No more merciful than a corporate layoff memo citing efficiency upgrades while families shatter. The absurd tidbit flickers through the chaos. How French gunners sometimes stuffed their cannons with grape shot made from scavenged church bells, melting sacred peals into profane projectiles that rang death knells with every fire. Though scholars debate if this was resourcefulness or symbolic desecration amplifying the psychological terror, mutating the iron taste on your teeth into a resonant clang like biting a bell's tongue, echoing the shattering of old ways. You zoom out lyrically for a breath, the field expanding into a vast canvas of smoke-veiled strife, where individual arrows dissolve into the broader barrage of history's turning wheel. The horizon, a smudged line of Norman hedges framing the end of an era's bowstring song, the cold recoil echoing like fate's indifferent laughter. Another moment of clever commentary slips in amid the reload. What a sarcastic symphony. The fall of bow-built empires to cannon's thunder, where English illusions of superiority shatter like glass under grape shot. No subtler than watching vinyl collectors scoff at streaming until algorithms curate their obsolescence. The pricking empathy deepening for Kyriel's captured knights, their ransoms now worthless in defeat's market, a sad deflation of chivalric currency. Revisiting Joan of Arc from Orland's Heavenly Voices, her flame surprises here not as the martyred maid but a lingering spirit in French resolve, her reconquest spark mutating into this artillery blaze that fulfills her divine promise, turning peasant prophecy into professional powder that blasts English holds. A twist where her heresy-fueled hope evolves into the very innovation that secures Valois victory. The torchlight motif mutates into the muzzle flashes of cannons, their brief, hellish bursts piercing the daylight smoke like infernal stars, casting erratic glows on faces contorted in effort and agony, where shadows leap like demons reveling in the recoil's cold precision, illuminating eyes wide with the realization of bows' obsolescence. The wet wool steams in the intermittent sun breaking through clouds after the barrage, its dampness evolving into a vaporous haze crusted with black powder that clings like gunner's guilt, carrying the mingled scents of sulphur, blood, and wet earth that permeate the air like a funeral pyre for illusions shattered. Empathy lingers for the rooted English, their flight a stumbling horror through arrow-riddled fields now pocked with craters, a sad procession that tugs at you despite the lines drawn, pricking with the shared fragility of men caught in progress's gears. As the French advance, their banners snapping in the wind like victorious sails, the field reveals its toll in heaps of feathered shafts and broken bows, long unused in this new era's symphony, a strange visual of archaic relics strewn amid modern craters that sends a psychological chill racing through you. What sarcastic fall awaits when innovation's recoil kicks back harder than expected? The mood shifts to resigned acceptance, your role in this shattering a footnote in the Empire's decline, the thunder fading to echoes that promise Castillon's final roar. 3 years pass in a blur of reconquests. Normandy falling town by town to French guns that reduce walls in days, what sieges took months, and you find yourself at Castillon on July 17th, 1453, the thunder returning louder. The cold recoil now a familiar quake as Jean Bureau's artillery, 70 great pieces arrayed on heights, unleashes hell on John Talbot's English force, the Earl of Shrewsbury charging rashly into the moor without reconnaissance, his cavalry splintered by grape shot that rips through ranks like divine judgment, historians debating if Talbot's haste was veteran overconfidence or desperate bid to salvage Gascony's last hold. a factual culmination where French professionalism ends the war not with bows but booms, claiming Talbot's life in the melee and Bordeaux's surrender months later, much like a final software update crashing an outdated system. Sarcasm noting the ironic poetry of an old warrior felled by new toys, because nothing caps a century of strife like cannons mocking the longbow's swan song, worse than a silent film star floundering in Torquay's roar. You charge with the French lines at Castillon, the cannon thunder shaking your core anew, each blast sending plumes of dirt skyward that rain down like apocalyptic ash, stinging your eyes and filling your mouth with gritty particles that crunch between teeth. The sensory struggle escalating as grape shot winds past, one fragment embedding in your shield with a thunk that numbs your arm, the impact radiating pain like a hammer strike on frozen flesh, while the wet wool under your brigandine soaked in the Garonne's humid breath mutates into a steaming barrier as heat from the guns bakes the air. Chafing sweat-slick skin roar where straps dig in, the iron taste evolving into a powdery dryness, like inhaling the dust of shattered illusions. A physical event culminates as Talbot's white charger falls pierced, the Earl dismounting to fight on foot in his 70th year, his sword flashing in vain against French pikes until a culverin ball ends him, the shockwave bowling you back into comrades who steady you amid the rout, English illusions shattering in the din as bows lie unused, supplanted by this cold innovation that levels fields with indifferent efficiency, the shocking element gripping as bodies pile in the Dordogne shallows, red rivulets staining the water, a sad epitaph for bow-built empires where Talbot's chivalric charge meets modernity's recoil. Pricking empathy for this Lion of England reduced to a footnote in Progress's march. His death a poignant fall that tugs at your heart with the injustice of time's cruel pivot. The absurd tidbit emerges amid the smoke. How French gunners cooled overheated barrels with wine from local vineyards, pouring vintages meant for tables into the muzzles in hissing steams, though scholars debate if this was practical necessity or symbolic toast to victory. Mutating the wet wool's torment into a vinous residue that slicks your hands from helping reload, the scent of grapes mingling oddly with gunpowder in a bizarre bouquet. You zoom out lyrically once more, the battlefield stretching into a vast theatre where old and new clash in final acts, the horizon, a blurred merge of river and smoke where empires bow to evolution's unyielding script. The cold recoil echoing like laughter from forgotten bows. Sarcasm curls in the aftermath, the fall so complete it's almost comedic. English dreams of dual monarchy popped like overinflated bladders under cannon fire, because nothing underscores obsolescence like charging guns with lances. No wittier than boomers railing against smartphones while their worlds digitize away. Modern comparison deepens the irony. This artillery dominance akin to electric cars overtaking gas guzzlers. No nostalgia rebate for the losers left in exhaust fumes. The pricking empathy extending to Gascon locals who switch allegiances as Bordeaux falls. Their sad pragmatism a survival dance in shifting sands, revisiting Henry V from Agincourt's rain-soaked triumph. His legacy surprises here as the architect of occupation now unravelled by the very innovations his wars spurred, a twist mutating his bow-born victories into cannon fodder echoes, his dual-crown dream dissolving in the recoil's cold blast. The torchlight motif mutates into the glowing muzzles of overheated guns, their red-hot barrels hissing in the dusk like serpents sated on slaughter, casting infernal glows on faces smeared with powder where shadows carve triumph into weary masks. The wet wool steaming in the cooling air, its dampness evolving into a crusty shell that flakes with movement, carrying the mingled scents of victory's pyre wine, smoke, and blood that permeate like a requiem for bows. Empathy lingers for the English remnants fleeing to Bordeaux's walls, their sarcastic fall a human tragedy wrapped in historical irony, pricking with the shared frailty of soldiers who believed in bows only to be felled by balls of iron. As night falls over Castillon, the cannons silent at last, their barrels cooling like spent lovers. The field reveals scattered bows amid craters, relics of an age ended, a strange visual of arched wood entwined with grapevines that sends a psychological chill through you. What cold illusions shatter next when empires built on old foundations meet innovation's unsparing recoil? The mood shifts to somber reflection, the thunder's echo fading into river murmurs, leaving questions hanging like gunsmoke in the air. How does one mourn the fall when it's laced with such sarcastic inevitability? The stars emerge above, pinpricks in the velvet sky, mocking earthly recoils with their distant constancy. The final battle's thunder a distant memory now, but the empathy pricks on, a lingering wound in history's flesh. Fading embers of Bordeaux's gates cast long shadows over your weary form, the dying glows flickering weakly against the stone like the last breaths of a vanquished era, each spark popping softly in the cooling night air that carries the faint, ashy scent of surrender, making you inhale deeply despite the ache in your chest from the day's final exertions, where the English garrison marches out under terms of honour, their banners furled and footsteps echoing hollow on the cobbles, a procession that pricks your empathy with the sad weight of lost dreams. Men who fought for a continental empire now reduced to exiles trudging towards ships that will carry them across the channel to an island kingdom forever changed. The unjust quiet settling over the city like a shroud woven from a century's grievances, whispering lessons in the hush where once cannon thunder roared at Castillon's fields. You lean against the gate's iron bars, still warm from the day's sun but cooling rapidly in the twilight chill, their metal pressing into your palm with a familiar bite that tastes of rust on your tongue. The iron motif now faded into a dull residue like the aftertaste of wine turned vinegar, evolving from battlefield sharpness into this melancholic echo that lingers as you survey the emptying streets, the wet wool of your cloak damp from the Garonne's evening mist rolling in like forgetful ghosts clinging to your shoulders with a persistent heaviness that chafes less now, its fibres mutating from torment into a comforting shroud, wrapping you in the tactile memory of struggles past, where mud from Agincourt and smoke from Orleans blend in the fabric's weave, a sensory struggle softened by exhaustion that makes your limbs feel leaden, each movement a laboured sigh against the quiet that amplifies the distant lap of river waves against the quays, carrying away the remnants of English rule like driftwood on an outgoing tide. A physical event stirs as a final English soldier pauses near you, his eyes meeting yours in a moment of shared humanity, handing over a tattered standard with a nod that speaks volumes of unspoken regrets, the cloth rough and frayed under your fingers, stained with the mud of 100 marches and the blood of forgotten battles. The transfer shocking in its simplicity, a sad handover that pricks deeper than any wound from Formigny's cannonade. Empathy welling for this man whose dreams of glory dissolved in the cold recoil of French resurgence. His weary form joining the column that fades into the dusk, leaving you alone with the gates creaking shut behind them, the latch falling with a finality that echoes like a period at the end of a bloody sentence. The factual moment whispers in the wind as October 19th, 1453 marks Bordeaux's capitulation after Castillon's defeat, the last English stronghold in Aquitaine falling without further fight, Charles II's mercy allowing safe passage but ending 300 years of Plantagenet hold. Historians still debating whether exhaustion or strategic brilliance sealed the war's close without a formal treaty, just mutual depletion that birthed nations from feudal fragments. Much like how a prolonged corporate merger collapses not in boardroom drama, but quiet asset liquidation that redraws market maps overnight. Sarcasm murmuring that it's also unjustly quiet. Empires reborn from ashes without fanfare, because nothing teaches lessons like a century of slaughter fading to whispers, worse than a blockbuster series finale that wraps loose ends in silence, leaving fans to ponder the rebirth in spin-offs. The absurd tidbit flickers in your mind amid the embers' glow, how Gascon wines once shipped to English tables now flow freely under French vines, merchants toasting the switch with casks that hid messages during the siege, a covert communication using barrel staves etched with codes, though scholars argue if this was widespread espionage or romanticised folklore amplifying local cunning, mutating the wet wool's damp into a vinous aroma wafting from nearby taverns reopening, their doors swinging with creaks that blend into the night's symphony of closure. You zoom out lyrically for a breath, the city gates dissolving into a vast silhouette against the starry vault, where individual aches merge into the broader hush of history's turning page. The horizon, a soft line of river meeting sea, carrying away old dreams to make room for nations' nascent whispers. Another moment of clever commentary slips in what lingering lessons in this quiet, where unjust rebirths rise from the unjust quiet of defeated ambitions, the fall of bow and rise of cannon teaching. That innovation's price is paid in forgotten lives, No wiser than tech revolutions displacing workers while promising progress that still leaves shadows long and cold. Revisiting Edward III from Sly as arrow-whistled harbour, his ambitious claim surprises here as the ghost of Inception, his dynastic spark now extinguished in this final flicker, a twist mutating his Channel victory into continental defeat's echo, his legacy a cautionary whisper in the reborn air where France consolidates and England turns seaward. The torchlight motif mutates one last time into the fading embers themselves, their orange pulses dimming to red coals that cast wavering shadows on the gate's iron, like hearts slowing after a long race, illuminating faint graffiti scratched by departing soldiers, marks of defiance or farewell that dance weakly in the dying light. The wet wool dries slowly in the night's breeze, its dampness evolving into a crisp stiffness that flakes with movement, carrying the faint sense of river mist and smouldering wood that permeate like a persistent elegy for what was lost. Empathy lingers for the exiles vanishing into the dark, their unjust quiet a human silence wrapped in historical rebirth, pricking with the shared ache of dreams deferred as nations stir from the ashes. As the last ember winks out, the gates stand sentinel in starlit gloom, their shadows stretching long like fingers reaching for forgotten crowns. A strange visual that chills with its finality, what whispers remain in this reborn quiet, where lessons echo eternally in the unjust hush. Fading torchlight dances softly across ancient stone walls, their glow dimming to a gentle amber that caresses the edges of forgotten tapestries, weaving shadows that lengthen and soften like breath slowing in deep slumber, while the soft hum of a distant river lulls the air with rhythmic murmurs, carrying away the day's lingering echoes into the velvet embrace of night. You feel the wet wool easing its grip, its damp fibres loosening into a comforting warmth that wraps you like an old friend's arm. The iron taste on your teeth dissolving into a faint sweet memory, like honeyed wine sipped by a fireside. As the psychological chill melts into serene calm, injustices of the past retreating into history's quiet folds where they rest without disturbance. Zoom out slowly now, the battlefield blurring into vast fields under a star-speckled sky. Nations reborn in peaceful contours where swords rust unused and bows hang silent. The horizon, a soft curve inviting dreams of tomorrow's gentle dawn. Let the environment fade further, silent halls emptying of armoured footsteps, empty chairs gathering dust in moonlit chambers, soft breathing syncing with the world's rhythmic pulse, as embers cool to ash, whispering final secrets to the wind. The unjust quiet deepens into profound peace. Lessons learned settling like dew on morning grass, reborn in the hush where history sighs contentedly. And as the last shadow merges with the dark, the world exhales in whisper-soft repose.